We are living in a very, very strange timeline because when Dune in 2021 came out, directed by Denis Villeneuve, I don't think anyone was expecting the masterpiece that we got. And I am going to call it a masterpiece. It's one of those rare films that audiences and critics alike laud as being something of a landmark. Now, if you know anything about Dune, then you'll know that it's had a very, very torturous few runs in the film industry. It has been adapted by David Lynch and it wasn't very much well received. If you look at any of the clips now, you'll probably see why. It's dated. And it was also attempted to be made by Alejandro Jodorowsky, who's a visionary filmmaker in his own right. And there's a documentary out about the making of that Dune, which failed, and it goes over all the reasons that it didn't come to plan. So what's the plot of Dune? I've got to read it because I'm struggling that much. The film follows Paul Atreides as his family, the noble house Atreides, is thrust into a war for control over the desert planet Arrakis. The Atreides are up against the evil Harkonnen who are trying to take over Arrakis for its very, very expensive and rare mineral called spice. Spice, the mineral that's needed for intergalactic space travel. You can tell that Denis Villeneuve loved making this film and has a lot of love for the original source material because it's all on display in the music, in the visuals, and in the locations, and in the props. Everything has this designed kind of deliberate nature about them. So for example, the music, Hans Zimmer, he won an Oscar for this. Hans Zimmer talks about it in a Vanity Fair interview that he's kind of sick and tired of hearing sci-fi films with these Western orchestral scores, which is what you'd expect to hear. Why is it that sci-fi films don't sound alien? So what he did was he invented new sounds, he invented new instruments, and he played instruments in a way that made them sound like other instruments. And it's like the syncopated drumming that you hear, it kind of mimics the sand walk that they have to do to avoid the worms attacking them in the dunes. And there's all these little details that makes the score stick out in your mind as completely original. And again, it's been reverse engineered from the source material. It makes sense the way it's been designed and has been made and designed the way it has as a constraint for the film. There's an internal logic that's on display here, and it's a lot harder to do it and, invent new instruments and new sounds, but goddamn, it sounds amazing and it sounds completely unique, so that's why Hans Zimmer won an Oscar there. And then you got Greg Fraser, DOP, who also won an Oscar for his work. He's worked on The Mandalorian, he's worked on Matt Reeves' The Batman, he's worked on Rogue One, so he's worked with some really big IP. But what he does really well is he manages to balance the constraints that occurs when you film on location. So for example, when he's shooting outside in the desert, he doesn't shoot in the morning or in the evening when the sun is the lowest, where you get these dramatic shadows and you can control them more easily. He shoots in the middle of the day when the sun's the highest. By shooting at that time, he shows how arid and harsh the weather is and the sun is, and that's for the storytelling. Once again, the cinematography is subservient to the storytelling. But he also changes the visual language up in different locations. So, for example, in Caladan, you're shooting in Norway, that's where they shot that. That looks a lot different to the high noon kind of look of Arrakis, and that again is very different to the deep, dark shadows and spotlights that you find in the Harkonnen spaceship. So it changes, but it comes together to become this very cohesive visual language that is based on the book. It's based on the source material. Once again, do you see the theme? Do you see the theme? Do you see the theme? And I can't go on talking about the film and how it was shot on location and not mention the work of Patrice Vermette, who was the set designer and set decorator for the film. And I would argue that shooting on location and the music and the set decorations, and which was done by Richard Roberts, I should just say that, these three kind of coming together to make the film feel real. You're in the location, you're hearing the music of the people from these planets, and you're seeing these characters interact with these custom-made objects that feel real, and it just gives this sense of reality. I also think what's really interesting is that Greg Fraser had the choice from the studio to do digital, to do IMAX, and to do film. And they kind of wanted to do IMAX and film at the beginning when they did. Him and Denny went out to Abu Dhabi and Jordan. They did the shoots at the start, the preliminary shoots and scouting. But what they decided was that they shouldn't do that because you'd have to have like couriers to take the film, and film can be fragile, it could have warped, it could have burnt under the sun and things like that. So what they did, though it was laborious, is that they sent the digital film to this specific studio in LA that handles film, analog film, and digital. And what they did was they scanned the digital into the film strips, and then they scanned those film strips and put it back into the digital to give it this kind of dirtier texture that gives it a bit more of a teeth. It gives it a, that analog feel that film does that digital doesn't, because it's so clean and pristine. Denis Villeneuve also does a fantastic job of immediately avoiding the pitfall that a lot of sci-fi films and books fall into, which is just exposition. You find out about the world through the cinematography and the dialogue and interaction of the characters. I mean, within the first 10 minutes, you've kind of introduced to this idea of the voice in which it controls other people, with a dinner table talk between Rebecca Ferguson and Timothy the Twink Chalamet at the dinner table, and you then go on from there and you see that Paul is really interested in this planet Arrakis, this desert planet where spice comes from, and how he's interested in the ecology, the people, the technology there, the values, and it's done in this way that blends mise-en-scène with the story. It's this tactile, environmental storytelling that only comes with directors and a cast and crew that are willing to go to locations and plan in advance, and this attention to detail to make it all come to life. It's got this thoughtfulness and deliberate pace about it. I like to say this a lot, but there's a scene. Everything is a scene. Characters don't say what they want. They don't say what they mean. There is subtext to what they do, and the editing between Paul's kind of visions and what he's going through at the time and in the events that are happening in front of him keep the pace of the film going and keeps things really interesting. Because the story is so well told, and because the source material is so well adapted, and because the scenes are so engaging, it's very difficult to kind of talk about the plot because I don't want to spoil anything. All you need to know really is that the plot is superb, it's phenomenal. It's not something that you haven't seen before by any stretch of the imagination if you've been involved in kind of sci-fi reading at all. There's the themes of colonialism or imperialism, or the implications of not listening to native people and whose side should be on. Think Avatar, right, but a bit more subtle. But that's all there and everything. But the reason that it is fantastic, other than this reverse engineering of the design or logic of the book and then being put into the film in this loving, handcrafted and detailed manner, is that the characters, it's that show don't tell thing that they do really well. Characters have these motivations and there's subtext to what people say. It's not a film that you can completely just switch your brain off and watch. You have to engage in it, but it's told in a way that is clear, in which maybe other adaptations weren't in the past, because it's hard sci-fi, it can be complex. Denis Villeneuve clearly loves this book, clearly loves the source material and has a lot of respect for it, because otherwise he wouldn't have brought on all the people that he did. And with a budget of 165 million, which is 40 million less than that piece of shit Argyle, he's made a film that's profited 400 million or something like that, something crazy. And for me, as someone who has watched a lot of Denis Villeneuve's films but knows that, like, for example, Blade Runner 2049 flopped, the fact that they gave him the license to make this film with the budget they did, with the people that he did, was amazing. The fact that he won all the awards and is lauded by the critics as well, I think is a really, really positive thing, because I was worried that maybe there's this danger that, because it's sci-fi, it's not going to be taken seriously. Look, the original books are masterpieces, but the films have struggled to make the time of day because it's been so difficult to take what is on the pages and make it into reality. But what he's done here is what a lot of people are saying is the impossible. He's made Dune, and he's not only made Dune, but he's made it a masterpiece. It's another masterpiece by Denis Villeneuve. I don't know how he does it. Hopefully me talking about those, the music, the design, the set design, the location, the cinematography, I hope that gives you a little glimpse of why this film worked. And I just wish that whenever there's other original IPs or adaptations of great books or sci-fi or whatever genre it is, I hope that they take a lesson from the internal logic of this film, is that if you love it, give it the time, work backwards from the source material, take the logic, run with it, do it on location, do the hard work, because people will pay to see it. And if it's show don't tell, people will love it.